More than a year ago, I did a program to expose the close ties and deep cooperation between George Hong and the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. George Hong is the father of Nico Hong, the author of a series of New York Times articles attacking Shen. George Hong once served as an overseas honorary director of the Western Returned Scholars Association. This organization is directly under the CCP United Front Work Department. It is often called the most powerful alumni association. What I never expected was this. George Hong had also taken part many times in overseas democracy movements. He openly joined activities or groups of so-called dissidents. So what was really going on? Below is an interview I did not long ago with veteran democracy activist and Tiananmen student leader Tang Baiqiao.
Nicole Hong, the one who wrote reports attacking and smearing Falun Gong the most. I don't know her personally, but I know her father. And I don't mean knowing him through his writing or through media reports. I mean I knew him personally, firsthand. Because this George Hong, her father is called George Hong. This George Hong originally supported the democracy movement. Just like what I was saying earlier.
Have you met him in person?
Of course, I met him many times.
When and under what circumstances did you meet?
I came to the United States in 1992. In the period after that, for about 12 years, he frequently took part in activities. He really did participate in democracy movement activities. Who was he closest to? Once you say it, everyone understands, right? Because now everyone knows. He had the closest relationship with Ho Pin from Duowei News. So whether he was pulled into it by Ho Pin from Duowei or by someone else, I don't know. Because everyone knows now what kind of person Ho Pin is. We don't even need to spell it out, right? So it's possible that Ho Pin was their person from the very beginning. So what exactly was the relationship between George Hong and Ho Pin? Let me introduce Ho Pin. Ho Pin is from Hunan, like me, and I knew him very well. On the surface, we were friends as well. So of course we participated together in many, many activities, including one event he organized called the Tiananmen Truth Symposium, right? I was one of the keynote speakers at that event. It was a very large-scale event. At the time, someone had published a book called The Tiananmen Papers. Around 2001, I think. That person used the pseudonym Zhang Liang. He was a high-level insider within the CCP system. He obtained a large amount of first-hand original materials and compiled those original materials into the Tiananmen Papers. The person who wrote the foreword was my mentor, Andrew Nathan, whose Chinese name is Lian Yu, and another professor named Perry Link. At the time, both were professors at Stanford University. These two sinologists were the most active sinologists in the United States then, and they wrote forewords for the book, promoting it very prominently. That book caused a huge sensation in the United States. It was called the Tiananmen Papers. In Chinese, it was translated as Tiananmen Truth. The Chinese edition of Tiananmen Truth was published by Ho Pin. So Ho Pin organized a symposium at the time, inviting basically all the major figures in the overseas democracy movement. People like Yan Jiaqi, Chen Yizi, Su Xiaokang, many people who were usually unwilling to appear publicly, like Wu Jiaxiang, Li Lu. Many of them later stopped appearing altogether. Take Li Lu, for example. He hadn't appeared publicly for many years, but he attended that event, and I attended as well. There were also people like Li Jinjing, who was murdered not long ago, Wang Juntao, and many others, by Ming, who has since returned to China, and so on. I won't list them all. So at that event, I also revealed some inside information, and Ho Pin was there as well, so I knew Ho Pin very, very well. But I also knew that Ho Pin had serious problems. Of course, I don't know whether he defected later, or whether he was that way from the very beginning. I'm just analyzing his situation for everyone, right? I suggested that the US government should investigate him. There is no doubt about that. Why? Because he is from Hunan. And he entered the Hunan Provincial Public Security Department when he was still in his teens.
Is he in the United States now?
Yes, he is in the United States now. He entered the Hunan Provincial Public Security Department before he was even 20. That is not an easy department to get into. And then at 21 or 22, he went to Shenzhen, to some newspaper. I don't remember which Shenzhen paper. And became a reporter and editor. Then at 22 or 23, he became the China chief representative of Asia Week magazine. The chief representative. That kind of promotion speed was rocket-like. Even the son of the CCP General Secretariat, the princeling, might not rise that fast. And he only had a middle school education. He claimed he didn't even graduate from middle school. Now, if you're running a business, maybe that's possible. But if you're running a media organization, that's really not appropriate. Yet he kept rising rapidly. And Asia Week wasn't even a mainland Chinese publication. It was from Hong Kong or somewhere else. Yet he became the chief China correspondent. Then in 1989, he did nothing and just fled overseas. After coming overseas, he became one of the most active figures in the overseas democracy movement. At the time, they ran a publishing house. What was it called? Not Mirror Media? No, yes. It was called Mirror Media. They published a large number of books, the Princeling series, dozens of volumes, all about various CCP princelings. Only later did I realize that what he was really doing was introducing CCP leaders at all levels, and their families, mythologizing them, raising their status in the public mind, to something like emperors in the past. A kind of aristocracy. This move was very powerful. On the surface, it looked like exposing them, right? Exposing princelings. But in reality, it was establishing authority for them. And it was a whole series. Books by some overseas democracy activists also had to be published through him. So many big figures in the overseas democracy movement had no choice but to maintain good relations with him. He was essentially their backstage boss. Because publishing books meant money. One democracy movement spiritual leader from 1989, whom I respect greatly, told me directly, I know exactly what kind of person he is. He's rotten, but I have to deal with him because he publishes my books. No one else dares to publish them. So on the surface, I still maintained a good relationship with him. Everyone should know who that 1989 spiritual leader is. So George Hong was one of the people closest to Ho Pin. Only when Ho Pin organized events would George Hong attend. There was a whole group of such people overseas. If Ho Pin organized the event, they would go. If others organized it, they wouldn't. If we organized it, he definitely wouldn't come. No chance. Then there were others like Xiong, Yuanjian, and a large group of so-called community leaders, Chinese expatriate leaders, university professors, senior community leaders, including Meng Xuan, a former deputy editor-in-chief of World Journal. On the surface, he supported the democracy movement. But later, he openly defected to the CCP. He said Deng Xiaoping was the greatest figure in modern history, and that Deng's crackdown on Tiananmen was the right thing to do. That was later, when he stopped hiding it. Meng Xuan was also a frequent guest of Ho Pin. So George Hong was exactly that kind of person. Later on, George Hong returned to China, right? And became a visiting professor at least 5 universities. So now let's talk about George Hong. We can say that George Hong, being a CCP person, is beyond doubt, right? Because on the one hand, he appeared as a dissident, participating in opposition movements. On the other hand, the CCP gave him so many benefits. That doesn't make logical sense. If they didn't suppress you, that alone would already mean the CCP was being very tolerant. Why would they give benefits to an opposition figure? So any opposition figure who receives benefits from the CCP is 100% a CCP person. There is no doubt about it. The CCP can give benefits to ordinary people. That doesn't mean they are CCP agents. The CCP might not suppress a particular democracy activist. That also doesn't mean he's an agent. But if they don't suppress you and give you benefits, then that democracy activist is definitely a CCP agent. Logically, this is completely sound. So what kind of person is Ho Pin? As I just explained, his background alone is extraordinary. After founding Mirror Media, he later founded Duowei News. Let's bring it back to Duowei. Duowei's development was an open process of collaboration with the CCP. At the beginning, Duowei published many anti-CCP articles. On one hand, it was anti-CCP. On the other hand, it viciously attacked Falun Gong, attacked Taiwan independence most fiercely, and attacked the United States most fiercely. I wrote an article. I was the first person to expose Duowei and Ho Pin. I was also the first to expose Voice of America. I focused on 3 points after researching a large amount of material. All content about the United States on Duowei was anti-American. I did a statistical analysis. 100% of articles published on Duowei were anti-American. Any article containing the words Falun Gong on Duowei was attacking Falun Gong. Any article containing Taiwan independence was smearing the Taiwan independence movement. These 3 points are exactly the CCP's 3 positions. Now, as a democracy activist, you might align with the CCP on one issue. For example, opposing Taiwan independence. I know a close friend of mine, also a close friend of yours. I won't name him. He also opposes Taiwan independence, but I don't consider him a CCP person, right? But if you also oppose Falun Gong and also oppose the United States, then that's it. So based on these 3 points, I knew what Duowei was. At that time, it still couldn't be conclusively proven that Duowei was CCP controlled, because on the surface, it was still attacking the CCP. It still had many columnists, like Chao Changqing and Hu Ping. I knew all of them. They were once good friends. So when did it become CCP controlled because of a man named Yu Pinhai, the former owner of Ming Pao. Later, he openly became pro-CCP. He came in and acquired Duowei and became its chief editor, editor-in-chief, and publisher. By that time, we already knew Yu Pinhai was a CCP mouthpiece. Ming Pao being acquired was also handled by Yu Pinhai. In the end, it was 100% confirmed when Duowei moved its headquarters to Beijing. At that point, there was no longer any need to prove anything. Duowei was acquired for tens of millions of dollars. Some say 9 million, some say 8 million, some say over 10 million, at least over 8 million. Because when Duowei was founded, several $million had already been invested. I know that when about 4 million was invested, that was the early stage. One 1989 student leader, who has long since secretly aligned with the CCP, was actually Duowei's backstage boss. Interesting, right? At the time, I didn't think he was connected to the CCP. He invested $2.4 million in Duowei. He was already wealthy then, though not as rich as now. Now his assets are probably in the tens of billions. Connecting all these things together, that 1989 student leader was probably connected to China very early on. This is very complicated, and it requires a lot of time, energy, and resources to deal with these matters. After Duowei became CCP-controlled, Hopin was deeply involved in the entire process. So who is Hopin? Yu Pinhai acted in a personal capacity at first. He was wealthy, a former Ming Pao owner, but in reality, he was essentially the CCP's white glove. The decisive turning point was when Duowei relocated to Beijing. It stopped pretending altogether. From the day Duowei was sold in name, Hopin completely severed ties with Duowei. Then he went on to run Mirror TV, Mirror Radio, Mirror Publishing House, and that too, without any doubt, serves the CCP. So within the opposition movement, the destructive role played by Hopin should rank among the top 3, or even number 1.
Regarding George Hong's relationship with him, I'm curious how they met. Was it after George Hong participated in democracy activities that He Ping invited him, or did they already know each other beforehand?
To be honest, I really don't know. There are 2 possibilities. One possibility is that both of them were connected to the CCP from the beginning, or were CCP people from the start, right? Then there wouldn't even be a question of when they met. The CCP tells you to make contact with him, right? To cooperate with him, and you cooperate. They might not even know what the other person really is, but some superior might say, contact George Hong more in the future. So he does it, right? That's one possibility. The other possibility is that Hopin or George Hong was bought over later.
From the public records I was able to find, George Hong left China in the late 1980s, studied in the US, and worked in the US, starting around 1992. But in 1994, about 2 years later, he began returning to China to lecture, invited by various schools. From 1994 onward, he returned periodically, off and on, all the way until 2017. I don't know if there was more after that. Later, as you said, he also had a Historic Scholars Association, which continued organizing activities in China until around 2023, during the pandemic period. If he was able to return as early as 1994, and if he really had been involved in the democracy movement, aside from the activities you mentioned with He Ping, I haven't seen any reports of him participating in democracy movement activities. Given that the 1989 massacre had just occurred, do you think that a genuinely anti-CCP person would have returned so early? What do you think?
Yes, let's talk about the peak period. No matter whether he was an undercover operative or switched later, there is one thing that is 100% certain. After 1989, after the Tiananmen crackdown, George Hong was anti-CCP. 100%, otherwise he wouldn't have participated in Hopin's activities. And I can probably find documentation to prove that. At the time, Hopin appeared as a democracy activist, right? So pro-CCP people couldn't attend democracy activities. The boundary was very clear, so if his first return was in 1994, that actually makes logical sense. After 1989, a massive number of people stood on the side of the democracy movement, almost all overseas students, professors, and sinologists, 99% of them, including my former parents-in-law, including I. M. Pei, Yo-Yo Ma, people who now have very close relations with the CCP. The Committee of 100 was established at that time by I.M. Pei and others after witnessing the shooting in Beijing. The first statement they issued was a condemnation of the Tiananmen massacre. So mainstream society was completely one-sided. Then came the 1992 turning point, after Deng Xiaoping's southern tour. The CCP declared it would continue reform and opening, and past matters would not be pursued. After 1992, many people were no longer targeted. What had been current counter-revolutionaries became historical counter-revolutionaries. After that, large numbers of people returned and re-established relations with the CCP. Over 80% followed this path. But once most people reconciled with the CCP, they completely cut off contact with overseas opposition movements. George Hong, however, seems to have maintained contact. If his first return was in 1994, I don't know.
1994, I checked.
If he went back in 1994, then the problem is quite serious. That suggests that when he returned again, he likely carried a CCP mission. Why? Because many people, like Fu Xinyuan from China Human Rights, after returning once, never again participated in overseas democracy activities. I know many people. That is to say, many people went back to China. Think about it. I came to US in 1992. How many people, just like Nicholas Kristof, I mentioned before, just like Bai Ming and Li Lu I mentioned, right, including Zhang Huajie, who used to be with Radio Free Asia, right? He graduated from Beijing Film Academy and was station chief back then in 1989, right? After going back, later became a CCP darling, right? He turned into a TV host, talk show host. There were so many of them, right? University professors too. Fu Xinyuan is one example, right? But if someone goes back, then comes back out again, and then re-enters this so-called opposition camp, participating in activities again, then honestly, we can say there's a possibility that they're carrying a mission. And carrying a mission like that is actually a bad thing.
In your impression, when was the last time George Hong participated in anti-CCP activities?
At least until 1997 or 1998. After that, it really dropped off. After 1999, after Falun Gong was suppressed, many democracy activists were handled by the CCP. Community leaders rarely appeared afterward. And any democracy activist who did not support Falun Gong, I don't believe a single one of them. Why wouldn't you support them? So many people support you, give you a stage, give you a voice. Why wouldn't you? If you're anti-CCP and you attack Falun Gong every day, then I think there's something wrong with you. Returning to China and then re-entering the democracy movement, that's like Tang Yuanjun. Tang Yuanjun returned, accepted tasks, and then came back to infiltrate the movement. People with higher moral standards wouldn't do this dirty work. If I ever defected to the CCP, I would never do this kind of thing. I would go back, take a position, retire, do business. No more any relation with democracy movement. I won't curse democracy movement. I won't say any good word for CCP. Live my old age peacefully, my own little life. See through the world. Fu Xinyuan is like that. Many such people, like Bai Ming, many are like that, just disappear in China. Even Fan Zeng was like that. Fan Zeng was also involved in the 1989 movement originally and fled into exile. After he returned to China, he never attacked the democracy movement, nor did he infiltrate it again. People like him still had a certain sense of personal integrity. You know, they were unwilling to do this kind of dirty work. Doing that is the lowest kind of behavior. Tang Yuanjun types are the lowest level. Okay, you continue democracy movement, you go back, right? Get intelligence for us, you have to. Right? So if George Hong is like that, it surprises me. I didn't expect him to be this way. I thought he disconnected from democracy movement and opposition movement after he went back to China. If that is the case, it is normal.
I'm not clear on his situation. I can only say that from public reports I found, he first returned to China in 1994. And not only returned, there were media reports about his return. That's why I was able to find them now. Because before that, I didn't notice him at all. I didn't even know his existence.
That makes it sound even worse. Not only did he do dirty work himself, his daughter is also doing dirty work.
I'm not sure about that. Besides them being father and daughter, there's no direct evidence. After finishing the interview, I did more research. I found that, in fact, at least until 2014, George Hong was still taking part in opposition activities. For example, on April 30th, 2011, he attended a conference in Philadelphia. The event was called the 100th anniversary of the Xinhai Revolution, Hu Yaoban and Zhao Ziyang Symposium. This event was organized by the Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang Memorial Foundation. The foundation's Secretary General Wang Shujun hosted the conference. He has been convicted by a U.S. court as a CCP spy. George Hong gave a keynote speech at the event. Well-known democracy activists such as Wang Juntao, Cheng Pokong, and Hu Ping also attended. He Ping and Meng Xuan, whom Tang Baiqiao mentioned earlier, were there as well. This is a group photo from that event. The person on the far right in the back row is Wang Shujun, the convicted CCP spy. Another example, on April 21st, 2014, a memorial service was held in Los Angeles. It was for Chen Yizi, the founder and first president of the Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang Memorial Foundation. George Hong served as the host of the ceremony. Many democracy activists attended. They include Li Jingjing and Liu Qing, whom were mentioned earlier by Tang Baiqiao. Chen Yizi was a former top advisor to Zhao Ziyang, and Zhao Ziyang was removed from his post as General Secretary of the CCP during the 1989 Tiananmen movement. He was sympathetic to the students and opposed the use of force. During the Tiananmen events of 1989, Chen Yizi also opposed the use of force against students. On June 4th, he resigned and quit the CCP to make his position clear. He was then forced into exile in the United States. He was one of the highest-ranking CCP officials to go into exile because of the Tiananmen massacre. Later, Chinese Premier Li Peng secretly issued a warrant for his arrest. And in 1990, Chen Yizi founded the well-known think tank Center for Modern China. So in the eyes of the CCP, this think tank was definitely an opposition organization. Yet, George Hong once served as vice director and project director of its research and development committee. Now, let's look at another document. This introduction of George Hong was published on the website of Zhongshan, China. The article says that between 1989 and 1997, George Hong returned to China 7 times. He attended international conferences. He also lectured at several universities in China and academic institutions in Taiwan and Hong Kong. People's Daily Overseas Edition and China Central Television's program Window on America interviewed him. They reported on his academic work both inside and outside China. He was also received twice by former CCP head Jiang Zemin at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. They took photos together. I need to add one more point. Up to today, George Hong's name is still listed on the official website of the Western Returned Scholars Association. This is a key United Front organization directly under the CCP United Front Work Department. Please look here. At the top of the screenshot is the website address. George Hong's name is in the red box on the bottom line. He is listed as one of the overseas honorary directors. So this is truly puzzling. Why can one person jump between 2 completely opposite identities? At one moment, he's a democracy activist. He plays an important role in the opposition camp. At another moment, he becomes a favored guest of the CCP. He was even received by Jiang Zemin. He also held a key position in one of the most powerful CCP United Front organizations. Not long ago, Taiwanese legislator Shen testified in the German parliament. He said the CCP found a Taiwanese internet influencer. They paid him $1,500 per month. They asked him to criticize the CCP. Then what happened? The criticism was required to slowly become weaker and less frequent. After 1 year, he was supposed to start saying this. The CCP isn't actually that bad. So this goes one step further than what we used to call the strategy of small criticism, big help. From what Tang Baiqiao revealed earlier, we can see something clearly. After 1989, many former opposition figures eventually chose to cooperate with the CCP again. The CCP has spent decades working hard to control and infiltrate overseas opposition groups. They stop at nothing. They even use all kinds of methods to attack real anti-CCP activists. For example, Tang Baiqiao said this. One of his former professors from China stayed at his home for just one night. After the professor returned to China, the authorities questioned him. The professor was terrified. He never told anyone that he had stayed at Tang Baiqiao's home. So how did the CCP know? Another example, Wu Jianming, a democracy activist now living in the United States, returned to China. He had only clicked like on Tang Baiqiao's Facebook posts. The CCP still called him for questioning. They even told him the exact number. He had clicked like 48 times. So here's the question. When the CCP puts so much effort into monitoring and attacking real dissidents, why is George Hong able to participate in opposition activities and at the same time be treated as an honored guest or even their own people by the CCP? This is indeed very hard to understand. But if we look at the bigger picture, it becomes clearer. For its own ambitions, the CCP uses many methods. On one hand, it tries to bring overseas opposition movements under its control. It even creates fake opposition groups to muddy the waters. It tries to make real opposition forces unable to do anything. On the other hand, when it faces people or groups that can truly threaten it, the CCP will use every possible method to strike them. Many of these methods are shocking and unexpected. This is why the CCP has launched media wars and legal wars against Shen and Falun Gong in the United States. If we fail to see this clearly and continue to be misled by the so-called mainstream media like the New York Times, then we are simply being fooled by the CCP. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. Please help me spread the message by liking and sharing this video, subscribing to my channel or my X account, and visiting my website jenniferzengblog.com to sign up for membership or make a donation. Thank you. See you next time.